My name is Tushar Singh, and I am currently pursuing my internship from Sparks Foundation in Data Science and Business Analytics domain. And in this task, I am going to demonstrate you the timeline analysis of COVID-19 for all the major continents and locations for the year 2020, which also includes India by using Tableau. So let's get started. Now, our first topic is to identify the most COVID-prone region, and you can also see that there is a plus icon besides the continent column, which we can use to drill down the countries in each continent like this. So you can see that there are overall 180 countries, right? And we can see the details of each country like this. So here, if I analyze, I can clearly see that Europe is the most COVID prone continent based on the highest number of people who are above 65 years of age. That's why it has a rank first, followed by Asia and then Africa. Similarly, if I want to check India, I can see that India is at 86th position out of 180. That means India is 86th country which are most COVID prone, right? And in the similar way, if I want to check the first top five country, I can see that it is Japan, Italy, Germany, Finland, and France, which are the most COVID prone countries in the whole world. So I hope it's clear. Now let's move ahead. So our next topic uh, is to analyze the total cases, total deaths, and the new COVID cases. So here we're gonna first analyze the new COVID cases in each continent, right? Which is followed by its trend analysis, and below is the cross table which quantify the data that I visually represented here. So first, if I filter based on new COVID cases, we can see that our stack chart is filter based on the new COVID cases in which is represented in orange color. And from this, I can see that Europe is having the highest number of new COVID cases, which is above 20.8 million, followed by North America, which is above 19.8 million, and then it is Africa, which is about 19.5 million. We can also see that all the, uh, let's see here, that all the continents are above the world average line, which is here represented by a red line. So world average basically determines the world average of new COVID cases. So we can see that all the continents are having highest number of new COVID cases than the world average, right? And now here, if I further want to analyze, let's say for Europe, I can see its corresponding trend here. And from the trend, I can visually see that from September to November, it has the Europe has the highest surge in new COVID cases for the year 2020. Similarly, if I want to see, let's say for North America, I can see that this surge starts somewhere around September and it followed up to November. Same, let's say for Asia, uh, I think the trend starts somewhere around March, let's say April, and it followed up to September. After that, it starts declining and it further declining. So in a similar way, you can analyze for other continents also. And if you want to see the actual number, and in that case, you can refer the below cross table. right? So now let's move ahead. Now here we're gonna analyze the total COVID cases. So total COVID cases is represented by blue color here in the stack chart. So if I filter based on total COVID cases, I can see that Asia is having the highest number of total COVID cases in the year 2020, followed by North America and then Europe. And this time, except Africa and Oceania, all the other four continents are having the highest total COVID cases than the world average, which is represented by a red line here. Now, if I want to further see the details of, let's say for Asia, I can see its trend here. And from the trend, I can see that the major surge in total COVID cases starts from July to November, right? And similarly, let's say for North America, the surge in total COVID cases starts somewhere around April and it followed up to November. So similarly, I can see for other continents as well. Now let's proceed ahead. Here I'm going to analyze the total COVID death, which is highlighted in red color. So if I filter based on total COVID death, I can see that North America is having the highest total COVID death, which is above 59 million, followed by Europe, which is above 56 million, and then it is South America, which is above 42 million. And this time, except Africa and Oceania, other four continents are either having the highest total COVID death than the world average or equal to total COVID death than the world, than exactly like the world average, which is represented in this red line. So if I want to further analyze, let's say for North America, I can see its trend here, and from the trend, I can see that from May to November, the major surge in total COVID death starts. Similarly, for let's say for Europe, I can see that the major surge starts somewhere around March, right, and it followed up to November. So this way, we can analyze total COVID death for other continents also. Now let's proceed ahead. Now here we're gonna see the correlation between the positivity rate and the total test and the positivity rate and the total COVID death. So if I filter based on, let's say, Asia, I can see that, let's say, in case of India, I can see that with the increased number of testing, positivity rate also increasing, but after reaching a certain threshold value, which is somewhere around 0.12, it maintained a constant trend we can see here. And similarly, here also with the increased number of testing, the total COVID death initially starts increasing, but after a certain point, which is 1,44,789, it is expecting that it will follow a constant trend like this. And similarly, let's say for Europe, if I see for, let's say, Russia, I can see that with the increased number of testing, there's a constant trend in the positivity rate for COVID in Russia. And here also, with the increased number of testing, the total COVID death starts increasing, but at a very slower growth rate. Similarly, I can visualize the correlation between other continents also. Now, next is the time series analysis of positivity rate. which is classified based on the number of quarters, and which is highlighted in x-axis. And from time series analysis, we can clearly see, let's say for Asia, that with the passage of time, the positivity rate starts increasing from quarter first to quarter two in case of Asia. After that, it maintained a constant positivity rate. And similarly, let's say for Europe, we can clearly see that from quarter first to quarter third, the positivity rate is at almost at its constant value. After quarter three, it drastically increased. So that means that there must be something that happened after quarter third, which leads to the highest increase in the positivity rate. And similarly, let's say for Oceania, you can see that there is uh, negligible or almost no increase in the positivity rate with the passage of time. So in this way, we can analyze time series analysis for the positivity rate. Now here we're gonna see the highlighted table that compares the percentage of total COVID cases and total hospital beds per thousand. So let's say for Asia, we can clearly see that from January to July, the percentage of total COVID cases per thousand is below than the percentage of total hospital beds per thousand. After that, it starts increasing, which is a concerning issue because this indicates that percentage of total hospital beds are lower than the total COVID cases. So in that scenario, uh, due to the unavailability of having more or sufficient hospital beds, COVID infection may get spread further, right? And similarly, let's say for Africa, you can see that from January onwards to December, the percentage of total COVID cases remained below than the percentage of total hospital beds per thousand, which is a good indicator. This means that the government of Africa is capable to handle the COVID infections by providing the optimal number of hospital beds to the COVID patient. And let's say for Oceania, we see that percentage of total COVID cases per thousand is below than the percentage of total hospital beds, which is again a good indicator, like we see in case of Africa. In this way, we can analyze our highlighted table. Next is the heat map that shows the stringency index and the new death in each location. And new death is represented by the red color here, and stringency index in the form of the shape. So let's say if I want to check for India, so India is here. I can see that the stringency index for India is above 21,000, and the new death of India is 1,44,788. So, which indicates that at the highest stringency index, right, India is having the lowest new COVID death. So, 21,000 is, you know, is almost at the maximum range in the stringency index, and I think 1,44,000 is very minimum, very lower than the maximum value of this range of new COVID death. So this indicates that the higher the stringency index is, higher will be the chance that we can reduce the new COVID death. Let's say if I check for some other country, let's say Nicaragua in North America, I can see that With the highest stringency index, which is above 4,000, Nicaragua is able to maintain its new COVID death below 200, right? Which again proves our fact that higher the stringency index is, higher will be the chance that we can control the new COVID death. And stringency index basically are the government protocols and regulations which are imposed to cure the COVID. For example, lockdowns, public gatherings, and public meetings. So, like these kind of measures. So, this is our whole time series, or you can say timeline analysis of COVID. And based on our analysis, now finally we are arrived on our conclusion. So first we see that Europe is the major COVID-prone continent, followed by Asia and then Africa in the year 2020. We also observe that India is at 86th position out of 180 countries that are most COVID-prone. And we also see that top five major COVID-prone countries are Japan, Italy, Germany, Finland, and France. That means that these countries have the highest proportion of people who are above 65 years of age. We observe that Europe have the highest number of COVID cases, both old and the new cases, followed by North America and then Asia. We also see that in Europe there are over 20 million new COVID cases, most of which are because of the major surge from September to November of the year 2020. We observe that Asia have the highest number of total COVID cases, followed by North America and then Europe. In Asia, we see that there are over 1,785 million total COVID cases, most of which are because of major surge from July to November of year 2020. We observe that North America have the highest number of total COVID deaths, followed by Europe and then South America. And we see that in North America, there are over 59 million total COVID deaths, most of which are because of the major surge from May to November of year 2020. And from the scatter plot, we observe the correlation between positivity rate and total test and total death. And from that, we see that in India, with the increased number of testing, positivity rate remains stagnant after reaching its maximum value of 0.12. And similarly, with the increase in total number of testing, total COVID death also increasing, but attains a threshold value of 1,45,000 after that. We observe that in Asia, with the passage of time, positivity rate starts increasing up to second quarter. After that, it attained an almost constant surge in positivity rate. And next is the highlighted table that we have observed, which compares the percentage of total COVID cases and the percentage of total hospital beds per thousand. And from that, we see that for Asia, with increase in percentage of total COVID cases up to November, we see that percentage of total cases per thousand is lot higher than the percentage of total hospital beds per thousand, which indicates the need of getting more hospital beds with time. We also observe that in case of Africa and Oceania, percentage of total hospital beds are a lot higher than the percentage of total COVID cases in this continent, which means that these are the most effective thing to do in order to control COVID, because if number of beds per thousand is lesser than the total cases, then in that situation it is tough for the government to control the spread of COVID due to the unavailability of hospital beds to the patient. And finally, via the heat map, we see that in case of India, it has a very high stringency index, which is an effective measure to control the spread of COVID. So finally, this is the end of our whole timeline analysis of COVID. And once again, I thank you everyone for watching this analysis along with me, and I believe that you will get certain useful insight from this analysis. And once again, thank you, Spark Foundation, for providing this valuable opportunity. And thank you, everyone. And stay safe.